And oh my God, I've just breaking news. Ozzy Osbourne has died, surrounded by love at the age of 76. A statement from his family said. That has literally just come onto my board there. Very, very sad. Nice guy, old Ozzy.
In a moment that's shaking the music world to its core, Ozzy Osbourne, legendary rocker and cultural icon, left behind a final message before his death that no one was prepared for. Known for his wild persona and fearless attitude, Ozzy's last words weren't loud or chaotic. They were raw, emotional, and deeply revealing.
Look, I don't get up in the morning and go, I don't gripe on you. Just get on with it. If you're still moving, you ain't gonna be dead.
Hidden within this message is a truth that could change how the world remembers him forever. But what exactly did he say? And why is this final revelation sending shockwaves through fans, family, and the entire music industry? A farewell that was never meant to be quiet. I'm dying. That's the truth. I don't need a doctor to tell me what I already know. Those were Ozzy Osbourne's raw, unfiltered words, spoken with the kind of clarity that only comes when time is running out. This wasn't fair talking. It was a man at peace with the inevitable, determined to write his final act on his own terms. And he did. On July 5th, 2025, something happened in Birmingham that defied both medical science and public expectation. Despite being almost completely immobile, after over 20 years of battling Parkinson's.
One day ago, the metal world was given some awful news to digest, as iconic vocalist Ozzy Osbourne appeared on Good Morning America with his wife Sharon Osbourne to reveal he has been diagnosed with a form of Parkinson's disease.
And, spending the last 6 practically bedridden, Ozzy Osbourne walked, or rather forced himself, onto the stage at Villa Park. It wasn't just a concert. It was his final bow, and he made sure the world knew it. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart," he said, voice cracking, his body struggling, but his spirit entirely intact. The crowd didn't just cheer, they wept. Because deep down, everyone felt it. This wasn't a tour stop. This was a goodbye. What made it all even more haunting was what happened just hours before his death on July 22nd, 2025. From somewhere backstage, somewhere quiet and dimly lit, Ozzy posted a photo to Instagram. No caption, no long explanation. Just 2 words. Back to the beginning. And for fans who knew the Prince of Darkness, those words hit like thunder. That was also the name of his farewell show. Back to the beginning. But looking back, it wasn't just nostalgia. It was a message, a carefully constructed one. Every move he made in his final weeks felt planned, deliberate, as if he was ticking off a list only he could see. The title of the show, the final photo, the rare appearance on stage against all odds, it all pointed to something much deeper than a rock star's last gig. This was Ozzy orchestrating his ending. Not with chaos and fire, but with eerie precision. Fans started piecing things together. The quiet meetings, the revisiting of old haunts, the subtle goodbyes tucked into interviews. And most of all, the way he spoke. Not as someone holding on, but as someone letting go. He knew, and in his own wild, poetic way, he made sure we did too. But the mystery wasn't just in what he said, it was in how he said it. A man once known for madness and mayhem now stood still, reflective, almost gentle. Not a scream, but a whisper. Not a breakdown, but a message. And we're only beginning to understand what that message truly was. But what did Ozzy Osbourne whisper in his final moments that turned silence into the loudest message of his life? Stay with us. This story is just unfolding. The night Ozzy knew it was time. He had spent 6 long years mostly confined to a bed, his body caught in a losing war with Parkinson's disease.
Now to rock music royalty. Over the weekend, I had the opportunity to sit down with Ozzy Osbourne. He's been dealing with a very difficult health battle after a terrible fall last February.
It robbed him of motion, balance, and eventually, the ability to stand without pain. But what it could never take was his voice. Or his will. On July 5th, 2025, in a moment that even his closest friends and doctors never thought possible, Ozzy Osbourne walked, slowly, painfully, defiantly, onto the stage at Villa Park in Birmingham. Not to say hello, but to say goodbye. Not with sadness, but with fire. Why did he do it? That's the real question, because this wasn't a man seizing a moment. This was a man creating one. Sharon Osbourne had spent a full year working behind the scenes, pulling every string, making every call to get him that one last spotlight. But it wasn't Sharon pushing Ozzy to perform. It was Ozzy pushing everyone else. Even when he couldn't stand, even when just breathing left him exhausted, he insisted the show must go on. He didn't want to fade away quietly. He couldn't. For him, silence would have felt like betrayal. The concert was called Back to the Beginning. And it wasn't just a clever name. It was a homecoming. The original Black Sabbath lineup, the legends who once turned music upside down, reunited on stage one final time. More than 40,000 people packed into that stadium and another 5.8 million tuned in worldwide. Metallica, Guns N' Roses, and Alice in Chains, they all opened. But the world didn't show up for the openers. They came for him. He sat on a black leather throne because his legs couldn't carry him anymore. But when the lights hit and the music kicked in, that voice, his voice, still shook the earth. War Pigs, N.I.B. Iron Man, Paranoid. Each track echoed through the crowd like a last confession. Each lyric a final thread tying him back to the fans who'd followed him through decades of chaos, glory, and pain. But this wasn't just about music. In typical Ozzy fashion, even his last act gave back. Every dollar from the show, reportedly $190 million, was donated to Birmingham Children's Hospital, Acorns Children's Hospice, and research to cure Parkinson's. That wasn't a publicity stunt. That was a man settling his accounts. A man giving everything he had left to those still fighting battles he understood all too well. And then came the words. Words that wrapped the moment in something far deeper than performance. I just want to say to you, on behalf of the guys in Black Sabbath and myself, your support over the years has made this life possible. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. I love you. We love you. Not just gratitude, not just thanks, but something bigger. A closing of a door, a farewell to the life that gave him everything, and slowly took it all back. 17 days later, on July 22, 2025, he was gone. But not before one final message. And what if Ozzy Osbourne's final words weren't just goodbye, but a hidden message we've all missed? Stay glued, you won't want to miss this part. When a legend starts saying goodbye.
The Osbournes are saying goodbye to their patriarch, as Ozzy Osbourne's loved ones gathered to celebrate his life more than 1 week after his July 22nd death at the age of 76.
You feel immortal. No, I feel lucky to be alive. That was Ozzy Osbourne's reply. Not loud, not cryptic, just honest. But he didn't say, I feel lucky. He said, felt. Past tense. And that subtle shift in words said everything. It wasn't a moment of reflection. It was a quiet admission, as if he knew his time was slipping away and he'd already made peace with it. It's what made that final Instagram post so chilling. Just hours before his death on July 22nd, 2025, Ozzy posted one last image, a backstage photo from his farewell concert. No filter. No fanfare. It simply showed his name above a dressing room door and the words, "Back to the Beginning." At first glance, it looked like a throwback, but in hindsight, It felt more like a timestamp. A man closing a chapter. A man who wasn't afraid, just ready. In the weeks leading up to that night, everything Ozzy did seemed part of something bigger. A quiet, deeply personal farewell tour. No cameras, no press. Just time. Intentional time. With the people who meant the most to him. He made sure to be with each of his 6 children. No speeches, no dramatic moments, just presence. Simple things like meals, laughter, stories that had been told 1,000 times, retold once more as if each word now mattered more than ever. He hugged his grandchildren a little longer. He called old friends just to check in. And to those paying close attention, there was a strange finality to it all. Not sadness, but clarity. Then there was Kelly, the one who perhaps understood him the most. Moments after the final show at Villa Park on July 5th, something extraordinary happened behind the curtain. Sid Wilson, longtime friend and partner to Kelly Osbourne, proposed. It was emotional, raw, and unplanned, except it wasn't. Because Ozzy had helped set the stage for it. He wanted to be there, not for the vows, but for the moment it all began. He knew he wouldn't live long enough to walk her down the aisle, but he could make sure he was there for the proposal. The photos from that night, hidden from public view until after his death, tell a story. Words can't. Ozzy, in his black coat, sitting slightly slouched, worn, but glowing. Not from the concert, not from the crowd, but from watching his daughter cry tears of happiness just a few feet away. His smile wasn't loud, it was content. In those final days, Ozzy wasn't fading. He was finishing. Piece by piece. Word by word. Memory by memory. This wasn't a man caught off guard by mortality. This was someone who'd faced it for years, laughed in its face, then calmly looked it in the eye, and said goodbye on his own terms. So, how do you explain a man who stared death down for years, then chose the exact moment to let go? Keep watching. When the world stopped for the Prince of Darkness. The morning after July 22, 2025, the internet didn't just react. It froze. Social feeds darkened. Music pages slowed. The comment sections on Ozzy Osbourne's posts transformed into digital memorials, lit with the glow of love and heartbreak from every corner of the world. Fans didn't just scroll past. They paused, they wept, and they remembered. Thank you for the music, Ozzy. May you rest in peace. You were the soundtrack to my entire childhood. Love you always. The words came flooding in, one after another. Not just likes, not just reposts, but real, aching gratitude. His last few Instagram posts, especially the final one, the backstage photo captioned "Back to the Beginning," became sacred space. Fans spoke to him like he could still hear them, as if somewhere out there, Ozzy was listening. But it wasn't just fans. The stars came out too, not to be seen, but to say goodbye. Adam Sandler, raw and nostalgic, posted on X. Whether we were in our basement with our brothers, in the woods with our buddies, in the car, at a keg party, on a boat, at football practice, at a sleepover, nobody was more badass to crank up than the one and only Prince of Darkness. Ozzy Osbourne. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a timestamp, a reminder of how far Ozzy's voice had traveled, into homes, into memories, into the lives of people who never met him, yet felt like they had. Jason Momoa didn't just share a memory, he had been there. On stage at Villa Park in Birmingham, I stood just feet away as Ozzy gave his final performance. He'd hosted the concert, and on Instagram, he shared a photo from that night. Jason in black, Ozzy seated on his leather throne, both caught in the amber glow of a spotlight built for legends. Love you, Ozzy Osbourne. All my aloha. Sharon and Ohana. So grateful. R.I.P. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. The weight was in the silence behind the words. Hollywood, the music industry, generations of artists, they all seemed to stop, not just out of respect, but when someone like Ozzy leaves, you feel it. The kind of emptiness that doesn't just echo through studios and stages, but through time itself. This was a man who'd howled into the mic with demons in his throat, and still somehow left fans feeling safer, stronger, louder. His music wasn't just heard, it was lived. And now, the world was trying to live without it. But even in death, Ozzy wasn't silent. His final messages, through words, through shows, through the quiet coordination of his goodbyes, were still rippling across the globe. And everyone, from basement bands to blockbuster stars, was listening. Now, can you explain a man who turned chaos into legacy and made his silence louder than any scream? Stay connected, this is deeper than expected. A titan falls and the world of rock trembles. The news didn't just hit the headlines, it hit the heart of an entire culture. Ozzy Osbourne wasn't just a performer, he was the spine of a generation, a symbol of chaos, creativity, and survival. And when he passed on July 22, 2025,
I do have some breaking news to bring you now because we have learned that Ozzy Osbourne, the heavy metal star known as the Prince of Darkness, really the godfather of heavy metal, Black Sabbath frontman, has died at the age of 76.
it wasn't just fans who mourned. It was a whole industry left staggering, unsure how to fill the silence left behind. Henry Rollins, the fierce voice of Black Flag, put it simply but powerfully. He was genuine, and that, to me, besides the immense talent, is his most enduring quality. It wasn't a rehearsed tribute. It was honest, raw, just like Ozzy would have wanted. Dave Mustaine of Megadeth shared an old photo of himself sitting beside the Prince of Darkness, smiling like a fan, not a peer. His words came from a place of deep respect and quiet grief. Thank you for everything you've done for us all. See you on the other side. They weren't just saying goodbye, they were acknowledging that something in rock itself had shifted. A loud, howling, guitar-scorching part of it had gone still. Alice Cooper, never one for soft words, spoke to The Hollywood Reporter, and even he sounded shaken. He was, and will always be, a rock and roll legend. This isn't just losing a friend. Rock and roll is a family, a fraternity, and when we lose one of our own, it bleeds. A titanic boulder has crashed, but rock will roll on. It wasn't just the metal community that paused to remember. Even Elton John, a world away in sound but not in spirit, took to Instagram. He shared a throwback photo of the two together, Ozzy flashing that mischievous grin. He was a dear friend and a huge trailblazer who secured his place in the pantheon of rock gods. A true legend, also one of the funniest people I've ever met. Because that's the thing people forget. Ozzy wasn't just wild. He was warm, hilarious, human. Behind the persona was a husband, a father, and a grandfather who fiercely loved his family. Sharon stood by him through decades of storms, on stage and off, and his children, from two different relationships, were always there, often backstage, often watching from the wings. Back in 2023, his daughter Kelly Osbourne posted a snapshot that now feels almost sacred. Ozzy, surrounded by those who loved him, eyes tired but peaceful. We are always the best versions of ourselves when we are together. I love my family so much it hurts. Dad? You were the other project manager in my pod. I love you to the moon and back. It wasn't staged, it wasn't curated. It was a daughter, watching her hero grow quieter, and holding on while she still could. Because when legends leave, they don't simply disappear into darkness, they resonate. Their presence lingers like thunder after a storm, echoing through generations, through voices, through lives they've touched. They leave behind more than memories. They leave questions, unfinished sentences, and when silence that isn't empty, but charged. It hums quietly with the weight of everything they were, everything they gave, and everything they meant. It reminds us we witnessed something unforgettable, and now profoundly missed. What secret was Ozzy Osbourne really trying to tell us in his final act? One the world still hasn't fully understood. Stay tuned. The final masterpiece of Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne didn't just live a life of madness and metal, he composed it like a symphony, and when the time came to write his final movement, it wasn't rushed, improvised, or chaotic. It was precise, painfully beautiful, and entirely on his terms. His passing on July 22, 2025, didn't feel like a sudden rupture in the world of rock.
Ozzy passed away this morning, his loved ones telling us he was with his family and surrounded by love. His farewell show was just 17 days ago. The legendary performer, who could no longer walk due to Parkinson's disease, remained on his throne while performing 9 songs.
It felt like a curtain lowering after the final note of a performance that had been building for 50 years. Because Ozzy, always the showman, always the craftsman, hadn't just accepted his fate, he had orchestrated it. When he stood on stage at Villa Park earlier that month, it wasn't just a concert. It was the final chapter of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. As the last song faded, he didn't promise a reunion. He didn't tease a return. He simply said, "That's good night." Not, "See you next time." Just, "Good night." Final. Complete. Intentional. The phrase carried an eerie stillness, like the house lights coming on in a theater after a standing ovation. The audience didn't just cheer, they understood. Somewhere deep down, they knew this was it, and Ozzy knew they knew. The days that followed didn't feel like the aftermath of a sudden tragedy. They felt like the closing of a well-worn book. Tributes flooded in. Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Elton John, and dozens of others who had grown up in Ozzy's shadow. Yet behind the emotional outpouring was something more haunting: order. There was no scrambling for statements, no confusion, no hurried memorials thrown together in panic. The Osbourne family released a message that sounded like it had been rehearsed, because it had. It wasn't cold or clinical. It was calm, like a family that had been given the rare gift of preparation, of time, of closure. His daughter Kelly's engagement, which happened immediately after his final show, hadn't been a coincidence. The $190 million in charity donations were not an afterthought. His final Instagram post, just a photo with the words, "Back to the beginning," wasn't random. Every detail, every moment, every goodbye had been carefully mapped out. Ozzy always joked that he wasn't Sinatra. "I won't do it my way," he'd say. "I'm just Ozzy Osbourne, always will be." But in the end, he did do it his way. Not by raging into the night, but by welcoming it like an old friend, unafraid, unshaken. What made it so powerful wasn't just the control, it was the intention. The madman of metal, the man who once bit the head off a bat and turned chaos into a career, had done something no one expected. He had mastered stillness. His voice, loud, unforgettable, will always echo in songs like Iron Man and Crazy Train. His cultural footprint, spanning music, television, and an entire generation of rebellion, will never fade. But the most remarkable part of his legacy may be this. When the world expected another wild exit, he delivered a masterpiece. Not just a death, a statement, a final act of intelligence, tenderness, and grace. And for those who watched closely, who paid attention to every carefully placed step in his last months, something became clear. The wildest thing Ozzy Osbourne ever did was leaving us without chaos. So what do you think made Ozzy Osbourne, rock's wildest rebel, turn his final days into a perfectly planned masterpiece? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.